Well, first, new Joburg Mayor Dada Morero starts work this morning. A coalition of parties led by the ANC voted out his predecessor, Paul Palatse. This was on Friday. The new Executive Mayor of Joburg joining me this morning. Executive Mayor Morero, good morning to you. Appreciate your time. Congratulations on coming in as Mayor. So there's lots of things I'm sure you want to talk about, but I'd like to start, if we could, load shedding and blackouts in your city. How are you going to do things differently? What do you imagine you could do differently for residents? Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. Of course, we all know that load shedding remains one of the biggest challenges, not only in Johannesburg, but in the entire country. And possibly it will translate into an international problem. So I think we were all aware that in other countries they're also facing energy problems. Now, part of our solution is to try and respond through one energy mix, and begin a process to say, how do we ensure that even if there will be load shedding stage 4, stage 5, we're able to try and keep the lights on in Johannesburg. We had a strategy developed a few years ago, which we thought it will help us to respond. However, as you know, that we had then lost power, and those that will reignite and reactivate the strategy that we had developed. And part of it meant that we need to roll out smart meters throughout Johannesburg, which will then help us to control the consumption and usage of electricity, firstly by household and secondly by business. And in that way, we are able to mitigate the impact of load shedding. But over and
what's your timeline on that, Executive Mayor? So it sounds like there's plans that you have in place that are there already. How long before we see this?
Well, it will depend also on our ability to raise the necessary capital required. And once that we have put the plan in motion, we'll be able to go publicly and say these are the timelines that we are looking at. And this is how we think we'll achieve in this program to ensure that there's at least some level of intervention as far as load shedding is concerned. How to try and increase the increase in terms of energy generation by those that will help us privately, so that we can increase our ability to provide electricity and keep the lights on in Johannesburg. So it's a big challenge, but it's a challenge that we're up to it, and we'll be able to give a practical step once we have consolidated our strategy.
I see not much love for you over the weekend as well. A comment that people must use more gas, Executive Mayor, to try and mitigate load shedding. You weren't getting much love on social media. Was that really such a clever idea? Use more gas, considering we're paying for power we don't have. People don't have money to pay for gas to cook their food. What did you make of your reaction?
You must look into the future, and it is important that we look at alternative sources, and gas is one of them. And we should not shy away from doing as much as we can to introduce gas for purposes of heating and cooking. And of course, there are people that will have their own issues, but these are proposals that we must put in place. And practically, we need to respond to the challenges of energy. As I said, it has become a world problem, and we have to find alternatives. And the challenges are there, but I believe that we can. Gas is one of them, and it's not the only solution, but there are other methods and alternatives that we have to look at. But society needs to be practical, and we must mobilize communities to participate in finding solutions. It was not a government problem alone. It affects every one of us, including the private sector.
To be fair, though, the communities didn't create the issues at Eskom, so it does come down to a government problem in the end. But I hear politicians saying that we must all work together. But in the end, it comes down to government making decisions. Why can you do a better job than the DA?
Can you repeat your question?
I can indeed. Why are you going to do a better job running Joburg than the Democratic Alliance?
Why are we going to do a better job than the Democratic Alliance? Is that the question?
It is my question. Yes, it is my question. Go ahead. Yes, it is.
Perhaps we have to start and say, what is it that was better that they did before we can even respond to your question? Because where we are sitting, there's nothing that they've been able to do in Johannesburg. Now, the ANC is presenting one. the critical issues, the matter around load shedding, and how do we intervene in it, and we'll give practical steps of what we're going to do exactly. As I said, one of them is to try and bring and roll out smart meters that will help us to respond to a few issues around that. Second, we will have to look at possibilities of bringing about solar panels and solar geysers within communities, especially the poor communities or township communities, as part and parcel of pushing back the crisis of energy. Thirdly is to increase power generation and procuring from power users so that you can respond to the challenges that we have. Now, I'm saying to you, and I'll repeat, that this is a challenge that requires even communities to participate and help us find solutions, because communities must also contribute in terms of usage of electricity themselves, so that at particular times you need to stop using your pool pumps at particular times. So there's a number of things that we need to do, but it requires that the customers themselves also play a particular role. It cannot just be regarded as an ESCOM problem. It's a country's problem, and the country needs to find solutions to the energy problem, and don't just reduce it, by the way, to just load shedding. You must approach it as comprehensively as it is, as an energy problem that we are facing as a country, and we need to find solutions so that the next generations are not affected.
And I'm pretty sure Executive Mayor will unpack many of those solutions going in the few weeks as well. I just want to talk about politics for a moment, Executive Mayor. I do understand I am just tight on time and we can't talk about power all day. I also want to ask you, how are you going to hold this coalition together? It hasn't gone well for your predecessors from the DA. How are you going to do it different for the coalition government?
Part of what we'd agreed on is to ensure that every decision we make, there's proper consultation amongst ourselves, debate issues as equal partners, and not treat others as stepchildren in the coalition. Ensure that everybody is an equal partner, and that's how we're going to keep this coalition. Secondly, agree on a minimum program that all of us are going to commit towards its implementation.
And I see one of the big talking points of your program going forward as well is dealing with a city that is broke. The city of Joburg doesn't have a lot of money. How are you going to fix that? You can't do much if you don't have the money, Mayor. What's the plan there?
Well, that is why we said the first part will focus on stabilizing the finances of the city. Look at how we increase the collection rate. Look at how we reverse some of the commitments that we know that will not be funded. How do we readjust them? So we'll obviously have to do a readjustment of the budget so that we are able to meet the budget. So those are some of the things we're going to do. And start creating an environment in which the city's financial stability would also help us to raise capital and can borrow in the market. Because currently, I think the city is unable to borrow because of how they've handled their finances. We saw what they've done with the property rates affecting public institutions, and they had to come back, revise it down to 4.8, which then meant your budget would be less 400 million just on property rates, because you went to pronounce property rates and later came back to try and readdress them.
All right, so there's a number of issues as far as finances are concerned, but the big talking point on what is your first day as Executive Mayor of Joburg. Wishing you nothing but the very best. I'm sure we're going to talk again. Executive Mayor of Joburg, Dada Morero, speaking to us this morning. First day on the job. There's a lot to do. We'll check in with the Executive Mayor, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks from now. Lots of promises for the city as well. Are you buying them? How are you feeling? You can tweet us at eNCA. Heatwave